So you are on our evening session for in conjunction with Women Equality Day celebration that is marked 100 years women can vote for the 19th amendments. Hopefully you do get a free session and you can read a little bit about the history of it. We have a really great mentor that joining us today, and you can hop over to our website to look at their bio. A couple things on our agenda today. A few of you joined early so that you can look at the presentation and listen to the music from the women's suffrage movement and look at couple of now and then a picture of all the women's issue movement that is still happening right now. I am excited that we do have a program partner for our conversation today. So I'll introduce her in a shortly here. And then after that, I'm gonna just pass the space to our moderator, and Dr. Angie Fitzpatrick. And with us today, of course, we have myself, Nina Corder, if any of you not familiar with me. So I run day-to-day operation of Women of Toledo and also the program at Women of Toledo. And of course, side along me, I do have Christina Al-Sayed, who is our task team for our program. And of course, our helping hand today is Dr. Angie Fitzpatrick, who is from the Eberly Center of Women of University of Toledo. And Dr. Fitzpatrick also is a part of our responsive advocacy task force. Many of you asked about responsive advocacy task force. We established this about a year ago to help lead, support, and assist at educating, engaging, and empowering our female community, and he for she means our ally, pertaining to our current political, economic, and social issue. So you are welcome to check it out, and we always love to add more task force that can help us with a lot of issues that we're trying to help in our community. Okay, and without further ado, oh, before we go in, can we do some wellness check-in? I think I forgot about that. So let's do some wellness check-in to check how we're doing today. So I just launched a poll today. We do a wellness check-in using the traffic light spotlight color. How are you feeling today? All right, good. So we have about 75% in green, mostly doing good, 23% yellow, and the best part is no one is in red. Great. Well, thank you for checking in with us. How you feeling today? Okay. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our program partner today, the matriarch. Kim, you can take it away. The screen is yours.
Unmute. Thank you so much, Nina. Thank you. Thank you, and actually thank you, Women of Toledo. We are so excited to continuously partner with Women of Toledo. This is an amazing organization, incredible leadership, and the Matrix, we just really appreciate, we're a statewide organization, and we appreciate the regional nature of the support that we engage in. We have worked really hard starting the beginning of this year, actually, to reach out to regional hubs and make sure that we have a membership across the state. And Women of Toledo has been part of that engagement, and we really appreciate it. So I'll be quick because I think a lot of the speakers are dynamic and we want to hear from them. The Matrix is an Ohio state PAC. We started in 2017, so we're very new, but we're very powerful. We have 1,550 members across the state. We have 44 counties in which we have members in the state, and we're growing significantly. We are frequently ranked one of the top PACs in the state of Ohio. We are a state PAC, so we endorse and support women for office in the state of Ohio. So not federally, not presidentially. One may be extraordinarily excited about what's happening with certain tickets, but we focus on the state level. We basically were founded after a small group of women went on the Women's March 2017, and came back and said, for Ohio, we need more women in office. And we need more women in office for a couple of different reasons. But most importantly, I'm going to share just a little something with you. It's kind of, why do we elect women? We elect women because multiple research points of research have shown that they work harder to serve their constituents. They tend to devote more time to their constituent services, to making sure that their constituents are being heard and being attended to. They tend to introduce actually more bills and resolutions. They deliver more money back to their districts. Their policy positions are responsive as opposed to prescriptive generally, and they're more collaborative with the opposition party. We are a nonpartisan PAC that endorses and supports women here in Ohio, and that collaborative nature of what we do is very important. So we will look and endorse candidates on a values lens as opposed to a lens around a particular platform. We have 63 women right now that we have endorsed and supported who are running for office here in Ohio for the 2020 general election. And I want to show you how amazing some of them are. But first, I want to give you an idea as to why we need, let me get that, sorry. There we are. Why we need women in office. And can everyone see the women in Ohio elected office? Great. So if you look at the current state, we came back from the march in Washington and realized that not only were we not seeing enough women in office here in Ohio, but we didn't really understand the landscape. And we quickly determined that no one understood that landscape. So we commissioned original research to show what was happening here in the state. And we have basically 29% elected representation here in Ohio across all levels. But when you look at some of the representation, I think you'll see that there's a bit of an inverse power curve. We have a lot of women serving at the school board level, and then it starts dropping off. Villages, judicial, counties, cities, townships, state, until at the federal level, 17%. But at the state level, 22%. And yet, when we have women in office, we have seen that they significantly respond to the issues that we as women, as our lived experience, require government to respond to. And I think this pandemic has absolutely shown that our needs are certainly not being met, not in this current environment. The last thing I'm going to share with you is our slate card. So I said we have 63 women. Do you see their amazing faces? We have a diverse, geographically diverse, economically diverse, and women of color diverse slate. And we work hard to make our slate as diverse as possible. And these 63 women have stepped up, and they're running for office, and we have gotten behind them. And I'm going to say what we do when we endorse a candidate: we help them, we give them money. Women have a very hard time raising money for office, and they tend to raise less than men running for similar offices. We support them with volunteers. And then I'm going to end right here and say, we also do mentoring. And in fact, we have held a couple of small candidate-only gatherings so that candidates that we have supported who are running for office have a chance to talk to candidates who've been successful or candidates who are running for a second or third time and gain their wisdom, because it's very, very hard to run for office. Very hard to run for office as a woman. And so the Matrix is determined to reach our goal, which is 50% representation here in Ohio. We should have 50% representation across the board in this state. And that's what we're going to achieve. We've set ourselves to achieve that by 2028. And with your help, we will. So thank you, Women of Toledo, for being so powerful and for allowing us to share.
Well, thank you, Kim. Thank you for the information. So if any of you like to learn more, you can check the chat room. That we do have the website link to it. And also if you go to our advocacy page, you'll be able to see their logo and learn a little bit more about her. And I cannot stress enough when you mention about mentorship, and then during lunchtime power hour today, also almost all the four speakers talk about how do they gain a seat at a table is through mentorship and through ally that's supporting them, especially women supporting women. There is a flagship program here at Women of Toledo. We really enjoy our mentor. We were unable to do our normal speed mentoring program because of COVID. So we've been introducing this type of platform where we could have a group mentoring and have a couple of mentors and leaders kind of share their area of expertise. And if without further ado, I want to pass this space to our moderator, Dr. Angie Fitzpatrick, who also a great mentor of mine. She's a feminist and activist and educator with more than a decade and experience in higher education. And then when I look at what inspired me to look at her is when I saw her quote that she mentioned that I have benefited from the energy and wisdom of many women throughout my life. And I feel inspired to invest my energy and wisdom in the women of Toledo. So pretty much women in Toledo. So Angie also have showcased that mentorship is very important. So without further ado, Angie, the platform is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight, to look at the past, present, and future of a variety of issues that impact women. We're going to hear from an amazing group of mentors tonight who are going to talk to us about racial justice, reproductive health care, economics, personal finance. So we are really in for something special. Before we get going, I just want to give you an overview of what's going to happen tonight. And I also want to ask that everybody make sure you're muted. So if you could make sure you're muted, then we won't get any feedback to interfere with presentations. So I see a couple people still unmute, or who are still not muted. If you could mute yourselves now. Do you know where the button is? Okay. And then if you're a administrator in the room, could you make sure everybody else is muted too, if they're having a hard time muting? Okay. So the other thing is, since we have 4 people presenting, let's go ahead and let all of them present so that we make sure we have time for that. And then at the end, we'll ask the questions, right? So if you have a question while somebody is presenting and just can't wait to get it out, take use of the chat box down at the bottom. There's a little bubble there. And when it's time for Q&A, I will go ahead and open that up and invite you to ask your question yourself, or if you'd rather I ask it, I can do that. So, okay, and I'm going to go alphabetically in reverse. So I'm going to start with Ms. Kelley Webb. Ms. Kelley Webb is the founder and principal consultant of Matching Peace, an equity-centered education company that serves communities, institutions, and families. Kelley's professional experience spans public and private sectors, where she focuses on improving company culture. She holds degrees in counseling and organizational leadership and is currently pursuing a PhD on interracial communications and racial identity socialization. Much of her work focuses on families because she believes that families are the foundation of society, that how we are treated within the family structure influences us and how we interact with society. Kelley is also a proud mother of a rising 5th grader. So everybody, let's shout it out for Kelley. All right, Kelley, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Fitzpatrick, for the introduction. Thank you to Women of Toledo and Nina for the opportunity to speak, and thank you all for being here. As Dr. Fitzpatrick mentioned, my name is Kelley Webb, and I am the principal consultant and founder of Matching Peace, where I actually help put theory into practice. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But today my topic is race and education. And with that topic being so broad, I'm going to speak with you about how about what people have asked me to present on over the past couple weeks. And since it has been majority women, I felt this was a good topic to cover today. So the term anti-racism is trending, and many people are really getting on that bandwagon of becoming active anti-racist. However, as Britt Hawthorne, so if you don't know her, write her name down. She is a anti-bias, anti-racism educator, and she is moving into the space of working with families as well. But as she states, for as long as there has been racism, there has been anti-racism. Thus, anti-racism has long roots in history and has been retermed several times. So if you've read books like Stamped from the Beginning or How to Be an Anti-Racist, which are New York Times bestsellers, you know they kind of give a lot of historical context. So if you haven't read those, I recommend you read those to have a larger history, because I'm not going to cover all of that. But some examples of history are slavery in the beginning of the US with the Constitution, Reconstruction, the Jim Crow era, and the Civil Rights Movement through now. Anti-racism has been a thread through all those areas. So terms like abolition and civil rights are the forefathers of this term, anti-racism. Throughout history, we have seen many firsts of Blacks, including integration of school systems, or being the first Black to graduate from a university, or we're still having the first Black valedictorian at high schools and universities. For those seeking to be anti-racist, because there's really no other way to be, start with learning the history and become aware of true history. So bringing this forward, many people have asked me about how they can talk to their children about race. And I usually, I study identity, right? My focus is racial identity, interracial communication. And I usually tell people to start with identity. And most of the frameworks do talk about starting with identity, but now I'm adding in saying start with history. So books like So You Want to Talk About Race are really great, but starting with history really gives that foundation. And I really want people, when they start with the history, to ask themselves, how would you have responded if you lived during that time? Okay, because right now, history is currently repeating itself. There's different names placed to these instances, but history really is repeating itself. So if you analyze how you respond with those injustices of the past, then you can see how you can help now. So if you're taking notes, learn about the anti-bias framework, which includes identity, diversity, justice, and action, as well as Dr. Barbara J. Love's Liberatory Consciousness Framework that discusses awareness, analysis, action, and accountability. So the two things I just mentioned, anti-bias framework and liberatory consciousness framework, both talk about identity and self-awareness, okay? So what I'm telling you to do is add history into that context, right? And then place yourself in history, okay? So these are areas to educate yourself in, to learn more and how to move forward in your journey to becoming an active anti-racist. So a side note within this, we tend to believe that anti-racism is just a black and white issue, but it's not. It's really learning about all races and how we can be more inclusive in our representation of races, languages, and cultures. We need to teach our children about justice inside and outside the classroom. And there's an increase of anti-racism pedagogy, as well as culturally responsive teaching, which is really great. I train on it, I do workshops on it, so that's great for the time that we're in right now, but we still have a long way to go. So for the future, I really believe that the future is us and how we raise our children. The future is you and how you raise your children. Some things that you can do to embrace anti-racism now and in the future is to challenge bias. I know that implicit bias is a trending term. We talk about it all the time, but it really is something that we need to do every day. It's a continual process, and it takes time, and it takes self-awareness. And it's a minute by minute thing, actually. So, but it helps you grow, not just in areas of race, but in life. So I always recommend that. And actually, per several resources, asking questions and setting boundaries are actually powerful tools for a teacher, for a parent, for any leader, for like anybody in a leadership role to gain clarity and offer new perspective. So I chose this topic, just kind of switching a little bit. As I mentioned, I was supposed to speak about race and education, but I wanted to make sure that I talked about anti-racism because it is a buzzword, right? And I chose to look at self-education more than just education in higher ed or in the classroom in general, because we can get education there, but how do we know that it's real education? How do we know? Because reading books like Stamped from the Beginning, that history is not what we're being taught in the classroom. And I wanted to point out that we have to teach ourselves so that we can teach our children, so that we can change history for the future. And I've encountered so many people in this space of wanting to become that active anti-racist, but we don't fully know what that term means. So it's hard to embrace it. It's such a broad term, and there's so many facets and nuances that we continually need to unpack it. So educate yourself, place yourself in a space where you're able to discuss your education, build each other up. I'm all about educating and having a space to have these conversations and learn from each other. And then you'll be able to see when something is wrong that you already have a foundation, you have the knowledge, you're able to question and have analysis, and then you'll be able to know where to take action. And that's all that I have for you today. I know that was really quick, it was really short, but there's some resources that I gave in there, and I just really want to really focus on self-education, especially as it relates to race and how we talk about race. Because if we don't do our work internally, then it's not going to help us in the future. So I'll throw it back to you, Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, hands up, hands up. Kelley, that was awesome. It was short, it was awesome. And you got right to the meat of it, to the heart of it, right? Like you said, you know, anti-racism is all the buzz now. There's a lot of talk about how people are engaging in performative social justice work, you know, just sharing things on their social media to prove that they know the buzzwords, right? But I really like what you're asking us to do, which is to go one step further, to really look internally, to educate ourselves outside of social media. And you're right, that's crucial to really ending racism in the US and around the world. I saw that Christina added a link in the chat to both Britt Hawthorne's webpage so that folks can learn more about, I'm assuming Dr. Hawthorne? Yeah.
I don't think she's a doctor yet. She might be working on it, but she's never introduced herself as Dr. Hawthorne.
Okay, you know what? That's a little elitist of me. She don't have to be a doctor to be on point. Okay, so Britt Hawthorne, she's in the chat box, so you can get that link there. And then Christina also provided a link to information about liberatory consciousness. So thank you so much, Kelley. Let's go ahead and move on to our next person. Sorry, I'm having one of those moments. It's Wednesday, right? Oh, long week. Okay, so we have Dr. Erin Marten. Dr. Marten is a doctoral prepared certified nurse midwife, providing full scope obstetric and gynecologic care in Toledo. After falling in love with the midwifery model of care, she made a career change in 2007 and began attending nursing school to become a midwife. She now holds a Doctor of Nursing practice with a specialty in nurse midwifery and is currently pursuing a master's in public health in maternal and child health, as well as a graduate certificate in human sexuality from the University of Minnesota. She has given lectures at conferences across the Toledo area, and her practice was recently voted Favorite Midwives in Toledo Parent Magazine. Kudos to you, Erin. Erin is committed to being an active participant in the changing landscape of reproductive health and the push for equality for all birthing people. She plans to utilize her education in midwifery and maternal and child health to create meaningful and measurable change in how we care for vulnerable mothers and birthing people. She lives in Maumee with her beautiful blended family. All right, Dr. Marten, take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and happy to be here and just really honored to be asked by Nina and Angie to participate in something like this. So thank you for having me. I want to make sure to note that I do use she, her pronouns, and just kind of quickly discuss that, especially in my line of work. I try to be really conscious about the evolving language that we use to identify ourselves, and just kind of quickly acknowledge that all birthing people do not identify as women. But to my knowledge, nobody's come up with a really great way to say women's health in a more inclusive way, and have people really kind of know what we're talking about. So I'm definitely going to default to using the word women a lot during this presentation. I did have such a hard time deciding what to speak to you all about this evening, because this is just such a deep and complex subject, and obviously it's something that I'm very passionate about. And also, I really just feel like I don't have a lot of really great news, especially when we're talking about the past of women's health. But there is definitely some hope for the future, which I'll address when we get to the end of the little presentation. I want to start by talking about access. When it comes to healthcare, we know that women definitely drive the decision-making in most family units. Women generally care for the health of the family, however they decide to do that. So whether that's deciding which providers the family uses, which hospital system, the foods the family is eating, how families get exercise, those decisions are driven mostly by women. But unfortunately, in our healthcare system, we utilize more healthcare than men and generally receive lower quality care. According to the United States Department of Labor, women incur health expenses of more than 80% higher than men, but are generally not treated as quickly or as aggressively. We wait longer in the emergency rooms, and we're more likely to be told that our pain is a result of emotional stress. Interesting little tidbit, the word hysteria comes from, I should say the procedure hysterectomy comes from the word hysteria, which traditionally was a treatment for hysteria. So just go ahead and remove that uterus and everything is going to be just fine. We also know that outcomes are worse for Black women, women of color, LGBTQ patients, Indigenous women, and immigrant women. So, then we get even further into kind of that intersectionality of the inequalities of healthcare for women. Very classic examples of the way of kind of inequality that we have experienced in healthcare are the male birth control trials, which were halted due to many people dropping out because of concerns of side effects, and the drug dose gender gap, which is something that happened in the early 2010s when women started having really horrible reactions to the drug Ambien, and essentially were overdosing on this drug. And it was only at that point in time that researchers even started considering that maybe women metabolize drugs differently than men. So that was 20 years after Ambien had been put on the market. So for 20 years, women were overdosing on Ambien, and not one person thought to examine why that was. The social determinants of health is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with. But the social determinants of health have a lot to do, I guess I should say, with how we access healthcare. The social determinants of health, if it's not something that you're familiar with, are essentially things like where we live, the communities we grow up in, the schools we attend, where our grocery stores are, how we get to the grocery stores. Do we need to drive? Do we need to walk? how safe are our neighborhoods? How safe is our infrastructure? I think you get the picture. And this is a big topic, social determinants of health, in public health and healthcare alike. These are the things that, as public health professionals, we are trying to address and adjust and change in order to make communities healthier. But recently, there have been more and more people kind of in healthcare and public health screaming about the social determinants of health, because we know that a lot of our health disparities are a result of these things, much more so than genetics. If you are a woman, if you're poor, Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ, or undocumented in this country, you are much more likely to experience worse health outcomes. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about the intersectionality of healthcare, and kind of straying away from the topic of, inequalities of healthcare between men and women. There are huge inequalities between different kinds of women in healthcare. And these kind of all harken back to the social determinants of health. So a couple things I want to cover really quickly. The first one is reproductive justice, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, and I think probably a lot of people are expecting me to talk about. Reproductive justice is, just a little background, it was a term coined in 1994 by an organization called Sister Song. This organization is made up entirely of women from historically marginalized groups that have essentially lived reproductive oppression all of their lives. And what reproductive justice is essentially a melting together of the concepts of reproductive rights and social justice. It's, the organization Sister Song defines reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. So how is reproductive justice different than reproductive rights? Reproductive justice is about access. What difference does it make if something's legal or not if most of the people who need that service can't access it, right? So that's the difference between reproductive justice and reproductive rights. All women at times, but mostly Black, Indigenous, undocumented women, seeing a pattern here, face barriers in accessing contraception, STI prevention and care, comprehensive sex education, alternative birth options, adequate prenatal and pregnancy care, domestic violence assistance, adequate wages to support their families, safe homes, safe communities, safe schools, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not because these things are illegal. For example, in many states, I should say this is kind of the classic example of reproductive justice. In many states, especially in the South, there's one abortion clinic to serve an entire state. When a woman desires or needs, or both, to have an abortion, what makes a difference in her access? Can she afford it? Can she travel to get it? Does she have time off work? Does she have people to care for her other children while she's recovering from the procedure? So again, what difference does it make if it's illegal if most of the people that need it can't access it? And we also know that 3/4 of women who have abortions are living at less than the poverty level. 49% of women who access abortions are living in poverty. So the other kind of big topic in women's health right now is the maternal mortality rate. And I hope that you are all at least somewhat aware of this. Maternal mortality rate is the number of women who die during pregnancy, labor and delivery, childbirth, or the postpartum time, up to 42 days after postpartum or after delivery. In the United States, we lose approximately 17.4 per 100,000 women during pregnancy or childbirth. And this is around 700 women a year. And this is the highest of all of the industrialized countries in our world. There are huge racial and ethnic gaps that exist between women when it comes to maternal mortality rate. Black women experience maternal mortality 37.1 per 100,000 live births, non-Hispanic white 14.7, and then Hispanic 11.8 women. And so essentially Black women are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth or the postpartum time. And this is regardless of education level and regardless of income level. So a wealthy Black woman is more likely to die during childbirth than a white woman with a high school education. Now, there are all kinds of things that I could say as to why this is happening, and you'll find a lot of data that points to the medical reasons. So the medical reasons are generally stroke, hypertension, leading to preeclampsia, cardiomyopathies or heart disease, hemorrhage, and infection. But the fact of the matter is that Black women are much more likely to carry these risks because of the social determinants of health. So this is kind of how it's all tied together. Less likely to have access to quality, culturally appropriate prenatal care, systemic racism and implicit biases ingrained in our healthcare system, like Kelley mentioned. And a big one that maybe a lot of people don't think of is lack of providers of color, namely Black providers, so that Black women can see themselves reflected in the care providers that they're receiving their care from. Additionally, just an interesting point is that there have been huge inaccuracies in reporting these deaths, which leads a lot of experts to believe that this rate is actually much higher than what the data is telling us, which is horrifying. So the good news is, after I've just depressed everybody, you know, I really feel like right now in our country, you know, it's a time of great awakening in so many different aspects. And it's easy to kind of look around and get really depressed, but in women's health, I mean, especially for me, because this is the world that I live in, but there are a lot of really great women doing really, really great things. The reproductive justice movement and the maternal mortality movement, I guess, to reverse maternal mortality is being led by Black women. So it's just so heartening and amazing and inspiring to see all of this work that's being done. It's hard to know, obviously, how to support these kinds of initiatives if you're not in the medical field, but monetary donations towards some of these organizations that are working to reverse the maternal mortality rate and address social justice obviously goes a long way. And there's so many organizations. Sister Song, like I discussed, Black Mamas Matter initiative created this amazing toolkit that literally spells out how to fix all of these problems. Black Women's Health Imperative, Mama Toto Village, there's Midwives for Black Lives, who raise money to cover tuition for Black women who want to become midwives, which I think is amazing. There's also, or like I mentioned, there's a call for Black healthcare providers. There's a really thriving group of Black doulas in Toledo, if you're not aware, that are doing really amazing things. And I am sure that they would love any sort of support that they can possibly get, and I can definitely facilitate that. Just really quickly, obviously advocacy, as we know, is a great way to help if you really don't feel like there's really any other ways to help. So the Momnibus Act, HR 6142 is calling for maternal mortality task force formation and review committees. Helping Moms Act 4996 calls for expanded postpartum coverage. The Kira Johnson Act calls for investment in community programs directed at maternal mortality, among many other things. And then there's also a Senate bill 1645 called the Women's Health Protection Act, which is designed to kind of reverse a lot of the attacks that have been brought on women's reproductive justice. So obviously, I mean, call your senators, call your representatives, ask them to support these bills, let them know why they're so important to you. So that is all I have, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erin. Wow, it just keeps getting better and better. And I'm seeing these threads coming through, right? I mean, we started off learning about how important it is to vote for women and put women in office, right? Kelley, you know, is giving us insight into the need for racial justice, for anti-racist education. And here you're bringing it together. I mean, maternal mortality is reproductive justice, right? Like, it's not just about access to abortion, it's about surviving the experience of becoming a mother. We have some links in the chat box again for groups that Erin just mentioned. And Erin, if you could take a quick look and see if there's anything else that you could add in there, that would be fantastic. We are going to go on to our next phenomenal mentor. We have Michelle Pommeranz. Why am I struggling with this? Yeah, Pommeranz. Yeah. I think I skipped you in the reverse order. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Somebody said it's Blur's Day. Betsy, you said it is Blur's Day. Okay, well, I'm mixing it up. All right, so let me tell you about Michelle, y'all. Ms. Michelle Pommeranz, CFP, is a financial advisor at Lehner, Carroll, Shope Capital Management. She brings over 19 years of experience in comprehensive financial plans and investment portfolio management to work towards meeting all investment goals. Michelle holds a Bachelor of Business Administration and Finance and minor in accounting from the University of Toledo. Go Rockets. She is Series 7 and 66 registered and is also life, accident, health, and annuity insurance licensed. Michelle has been involved in many charitable and social organizations, including Women of Toledo, Make-A-Wish Foundation, Mommy and Perrysburg Chamber of Commerce, and Women's Entrepreneurial Network, among others. She lives in Monclova with her husband, Marten, their son, Madden, and their happy lab, Marks. Okay, Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening to everybody. I have slides. I'm not sure who's doing the slides, but today I'm going to talk about women in money, past, present, and future. Since technically it is cocktail hour, let's play a little. Every time I say financial planning, take a little sip of your favorite choice, and at the end we'll see how many sips you get to, okay? Let's take a look first at my timeline from the past. In 1813, married women can obtain ownership of their property. This law allowed only married women to own property, keep their own income, and engage in business. In 1908, women's work hours were reduced, limiting the hours that they could work, made it so that women were unable to earn enough money to support themselves and family. Plus, the Supreme Court explicitly called on a woman's physical structure and the performance of maternal functions when making their decision. In 1938, the Fair Standard of Labor Act is passed. American employers adopt for an 8-hour work week, a work day, 40-hour work week, minimum wage for all laborers. In the 1960s, all women in all states gained the right to open a bank account. Before this law was passed, women couldn't open a bank account without their husband's signatures or a male family member's signatures. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act is passed. The goal was to eliminate pay disparity between the genders. In 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act is passed. Before this, banks only granted credit cards to married women if their husband signed off on it, wouldn't grant cards to any unmarried women. In 1978, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act was forced. It allowed women not to lose their jobs when they got pregnant. So there's some of the past timelines that we've looked at as far as women in money, how far we have come. Today, women have taken the reins when it comes to managing the household finances. A survey found that 51% of women considered themselves the CFO of their household. Despite maintaining a dominant role with household finances, 63% of women wish they knew more about financial planning and investing. The basis of managing money may be gender neutral, but women still face unique challenges when it comes to personal finance and financial planning. Many Americans don't save enough money for retirement, but women face particular challenges. There are often extra burdens on their retirement income, including longer life expectancy, greater health care costs, and the greater likelihood they will provide for their children and parents. At the same time, their ability to save is often reduced due to wages and career interruption with raising children. This means women have to be specifically diligent about retirement planning and how it affects their overall financial plan. A survey of more than 2,000 married adults found that 43% of their those who have life insurance say not be financially prepared if they lost their spouse, and women would be affected more than men. Married women have more concerns than married men. 4 women surveyed said that their ability to make payments, save for college tuition, and pay bills would be adversely affected by the death of their spouse, compared with 37% of men. Women also were less likely to know the terms of their spouse's life insurance policy, 57% compared to 69% of men. The average life expectancy of Americans is at historical highs. Women are leading the way, now outliving men on an average of 5 years. Couples appear ill-prepared to face this reality with significant insurance coverage. In this area where the longevity gap, which favors women, collides pay gap where men earn more. The result is that women are often more financially vulnerable when their spouse dies. Men and women are different in many ways, and that certainly includes how we think about investing. Our feelings about risks are different. Many women want and need financial security first. Due to our typically shorter working lives, lower pay on average for the same work, and working lifespans, we may have smaller retirement funds which have to last longer. Many of us learn at an early age that we should let men in our lives handle our finances, and we should adjust to changing that mindset. For the majority of women at some point in their life, we and we alone will be responsible for handling our own financial affairs. So it is important that we don't let that past mindset impede on our ability to move forward and take charge of our own financial affairs. I've created a list in no particular order of some of the ways women are different. These are generalizations, of course, and there's always an exception, whether both male or female. All are true according to the research. Women are less likely than men to feel that their financial situation is better than that of others in the same social economical level. Women are more risk adverse than men. Women are far more likely than men to buy things they don't need. One exception probably would be my husband. Women are less likely than men to be satisfied with their abilities to reach long-term goals. Despite 50 plus years since the passage of the Equal Pay Act, women still on average earn 20% less than men do for the same work. Single parent women are 2 times as likely as single parent men to be below the federal poverty level. Women ask for directions. They are more likely to seek out the help of a financial advisor, particularly when in transition, divorce, death of a partner, and job loss. Women will play down their personal success or accomplishments or wealth to avoid making other people feel uncomfortable. Women are more likely to be underconfident when it comes to managing their investments and assume that they do not know enough to do a very good job. Men, by contrast, are more typically overconfident, thinking that they know more than they actually do. Women live longer than men on an average of 5 to 7 years. However, if you factor in the probability of a woman marrying a man who is older than herself, she will likely outsurvive her husband and potentially live alone for a significantly longer life period of time. The most important financial goals for women are usually security and the ability to take care of themselves. Women are far more likely than men to involve their partners in financial decision-making. Women's out-of-pocket drug costs in retirement are approximately 50% higher than men's. Women are more likely to start their own business to achieve a more work-family balance, whereas men start their own firms to be the boss. Men's brains are hardwired to take action, whereas women's brains are hardwired to think it through. Women have a harder time getting finance for business startups than men. As a result, women entrepreneurs are more likely to start non-capital intensive businesses, service companies, than men. Women reportedly report that they cannot live without internet, sleep, or showers, whereas men report that they cannot live without internet, sleep, or sex. And for the fun bonus, women are significantly more likely to wash their hands after using the public restroom than men. The next generation of women is particularly eager for greater financial knowledge. The majority of young women are interested in understanding financial concepts on a deeper level, but over half of those women were to seek out that information. For women who have sought help for financial advisors and did financial planning, remember, take a drink, financial planning, 93% of them have established financial goals and are on the right path to a more successful financial foundation. Today's generation of women who take the time to build an in-depth financial knowledge base will see empowering benefits and also set the standards for future generations to come. And here are your future 7 things every woman should do to get her finance in order for your future. Everyone needs to know a man is never a financial plan. Women and men have different goals in life. One of the biggest challenges for women is meeting competing needs. When I do education seminars on personal finance, men in the audience tend to be more interested on tips of the market trends and what stock to buy right now. Whereas women ask questions on how to balance their goals, sending kids to college, retiring comfortably, and caring for an elderly parent. Financial planning can answer a lot of those questions. Number 1, we want to pick the right financial planner, someone who understands your needs and that you trust. Overall, women don't trust the financial service industry because they experience disrespect. Only 23% of financial planners are women. Number 2, invest with confidence. Don't let your fear run your investment strategy. For women, money represents security, and they tend to fear putting it all at risk. Women are more risk averse than men and more likely to dwell on potential losses than potential gains when investing. Invest in quality. Diversify your investments across cash, stocks, bonds, and real estate. There are safety in numbers. Don't be too conservative. Women have longevity risk. If you invest money in savings accounts and CDs because you're afraid of volatility, inflation is going to cause your investments to lose value. You will outlive your money. Be sure to have adequate equity exposure. Number 3, protect your retirement. A plan provides peace of mind for women. Financial success is about protecting yourself and the loved ones from uncertainty. Financial planning, which is your roadmap to retirement, factors resources, expenses, assets, debts, and goals. Contact a financial planner to get started on one. Assume that you're going to need 80 to 90% of pre-retirement income during retirement. Make savings a priority. 41% of Americans spend less than they make. 36% spend about as much as they make, and 19% spend more than they make. Spend no more than 90% of your. Use your deferred plans to as much as you can, but at least what your company is going to match you. Diversify your investments and never ever borrow against your retirement. Have a budget and stick to it. Excuse me. Control your debt. The average American has $7,000 in credit card debt. The average fixed credit card rate is 13.02. So it's going to take you 300 months to pay off that credit card. Have emergency savings. Rule of thumb, 3 months of expenses if you're married and both of you work. 6 months if you're single and only one spouse works. Have adequate disability and life insurance. Here are some key life events to think about. Marriage, how do you manage your finances? Children, how to care for your child 20 years or more, and what about their education? Divorce, 50% of marriages end in divorce. Widowhood, female baby boomers are likely to be widowed by age 67 and remain so for about 15 years or more. 9 out of 10 women will be on their own at some point in their adult life. Caregiving, the need to care for elderly parents is becoming the norm. Using your time, energy, and resources. Retirement, how are you going to plan for potential 30-year span in retirement? Number 4, don't be naive. Know your spouse's and retirement plans. Many times the man makes financial decisions. Sometimes these decisions are not in the woman's best interests, such as early retirement benefits and lower survivor benefits as a pension. Excuse me, did I say 50% of marriages end in divorce? Number 5, set limits on helping your kids. Moms don't like to tell their kids no. More than 80% of women who are married or divorced will have to help one of their children in crisis. Even if kids don't need a bailout, college is expensive. Having conversations early on and setting realistic expectations. Remember, you can borrow for college, but you cannot borrow for retirement. Number 6, plan for long-term care. 80% of men die married, while 80% of women die single. Your financial plan to include expectations on who will help care for medical and caregiving needs. Most buy long-term care insurance, so they will not be a burden on their children. 7, have an estate plan, including an updated will, healthcare proxy, and power of attorney. 70% of Americans with children under the age of 18 admit to not having a will. The main reason, they simply haven't had to do it. It's most important because it allows you to dictate what to happen with your money and your children and the investments of your children's assets. If you die without a will, the state may step in and your property will be divided according to state law. My view on women and money, past, present, in the future, and if you kept count, I said financial planning 10 times. Thank you for letting me speak tonight, and thank you, Nina, for inviting me to speak on such an important subject.
So let me tell you about Ms. Katy Crosby real quick, y'all. Get to my page here. Okay. Katy serves as the Chief of Staff for the City of Toledo, where she works with a team to oversee the city operations and advance the mayor's policy agenda. I do not know how to say the mayor's name. I just moved to Toledo. Say it again.
Capsa cabbage. So when I first got here, I would just remember cabbage. So capsa cabbage.
Capsa cabbage. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so Katy's community involvement has earned her a number of recognitions, including being named a Biz Women Power 50 by the Dayton Business Journal 3 years in a row. Big props to you. She's committed to developing talent and serves as a mentor, connecting young professionals to individuals that provide insight on career development. Katy holds a BS in accounting from Wilberforce University and an MPA from Wright State University. Her daughter Erin is, it looks like, following in her mother's footsteps. Is a senior at Stivers School for the Arts, plans to attend Alabama A&M in the fall, where she'll study business administration with a minor in marketing. All right, Katy, take it away.
All right, so that bio is a little bit dated. My daughter is actually a junior at Alabama A&M, so she just started school last week. So time has really flown very quickly. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited and I'm excited about the information that Kelley shared, that Erin shared, and that we were hearing in the previous presentation. So I hope that she makes it back on, because I think all of what I'm going to talk to you all about will tie in together. When you think about equity as it relates to women, it also ties into equity as it relates to race. And so I'm going to talk about it from a gender perspective, but try to tie all of the information that we just heard together, especially given everything that's going on in our society today. I'm going to also give you a long list of books, but this time I came with a PowerPoint presentation so that you don't have to write them down or type them into the screen. But just thinking about what we talked about, being an anti-racist, how to address equity, talking about social determinants of health, all of this is rooted in how our communities were formed. It's rooted in how, our society came to be. It's rooted in how from the perspective of the African-American community, how Africans were brought over, how slavery started, how African-American women were raped and were also responsible for taking care of the child, and what that did to the Black family. And you bring it up today, and that'll tie into some of the inequities we get, not just with women, but even more disparate inequities with Black women. But I'm going to approach it from a gender equity perspective. So I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit mostly about what we're seeing today in terms of wage inequity and how COVID-19 is impacting wage inequity, and some of the things that we can do to help make sure that we don't lose a lot of the gains that we've achieved as women moving forward, and then some of the things that we can do to continue to support other women. So let me share my screen. Oh, can you enable screen share for me? I'm sorry. I know I probably should have sent this ahead of time.
It's okay. We got it. Give me a second.
Oh, it's allowing me.
Okay, got it.
All right, so let me see how to do this. So I used pink because I felt like that was appropriate for the discussion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Women's Equality Day, of course, social advocacy and the economy. So I'm going to start first with really talking about male to female earnings. One of the things that I do, in addition to my daytime job, is I do some consulting work with communities across the country around fair housing issues, and a lot of that work centers around inequities in earnings. And so in most communities, we find that male earnings are far exceed female earnings. So in Ohio, it's 1.34 times more, males make 1.34 times more than women. And that's pretty much the same that we see nationally. In Toledo specifically, or in Ohio specifically, these are some of the areas where we see men outperforming women in terms of wage growth. When we talk about the impact of COVID-19, what we're continuing to hear is that we have these essential workers that don't have access to health care, they don't have the access to affordable childcare, and they have to continue to go to work. And what we're finding is that there are more women who are working in these jobs that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this slide right here really shows the impact of these jobs. So we talk about accommodation and food services. So we know that the restaurant industry is severely impacted because we are social distancing. And so folks are not going out to eat and things like that. And we see that more women work in those industries. We also see wholesale and retail trade. So we're seeing that, people are not going into the malls and other locations to shop and things like that. And we have a lot of women that are working in those areas. So this is where we're seeing a lot of impact in terms of employment as it relates to COVID-19. And then right here are the male dominated jobs. And then this is a little small circle or medium-sized circle of the jobs that are in fact impacted by men, these lighter blue areas. So we're seeing from a graphical or pictorial representation of how much COVID-19 is really impacting women in the workforce. And really the only place where we're not seeing as much of an impact is in the human health and social work areas. So the city of Toledo recently did a study on our HUD entitlement dollars, and looking at those dollars, one of the things that we pointed out is that 33% of our family households are single female households, and those households, their median household income is just above the federal poverty level. What does that mean? When you have a female-headed household, if that female is in poverty, then that child is in poverty. And so that really affects that child's ability to thrive. And when we're thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're thinking about kids who are now working, having to go to school from home, and them not having access to computers and things like that. I was watching something this morning that said there's like a 5 million laptop shortage, and it's most significantly impacting communities where there's high poverty, and those communities essentially end up being communities of color, or disproportionately communities of color. When you talk about the impact of COVID-19, we keep hearing that it is more significantly impacting women. So prior to COVID-19, there is research from the Boston Consulting Group and other research that says that working women spend more time on unpaid domestic responsibilities than men. So we know that we cook, we go to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but we also cook. We also come home and clean. We put the kids to bed. When we walk in the house, we don't get an opportunity to sit down for a minute because we know that our babies want to talk to us, or they need support from us. They tend to run to mom first. So women spend an average of 15 hours a week more on these unpaid domestic responsibilities. Secondly, households with children's parents are putting in an extra 6 hours a day in care and supervision, and 2/3 of that is extra time that the women is spending. So it really just complements what I just talked to you about with the Boston Consulting Group. Post-COVID-19, women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable than men's jobs. Women make up 39% of the global employment, but account for 54% of overall job loss. The virus significantly increases the burden of unpaid care which disproportionately impacts women, and the pandemic could essentially dilute the decades of advancement of gender equality. And all of these studies that I've documented in here, I have a resource slide if you want to go and check out that information. So when we talk about the gains that we've made in order to move the needle forward in terms of being more equitable, we still have a long way to go. So when you're thinking about your work, even when you talk about being an anti-racist, or when you talk about promoting gender equality, it's the same metrics that you can use to promote equity. So when we're talking about gender equity, we're talking about gender equity in the workplace and in society. And so there are 15 data points that McKinsey Global Institute uses to determine gender equality indicators. And so this is just a list of all of those indicators. And a lot of it is what we talked about. We talked about maternal mortality. We talked about financial inclusion. We talked about women in the workplace. We talked about women in professional and technical jobs. We even talked about the perception of women in the workplace and their ability to be able to juggle family and work and still be able to succeed. And this is not anything new. It's something that's going to probably continue for a long time. It's not going to end today, but we hope that we continue to make strides. So what are some of the things that you can do when you're trying to promote equity and you're trying to help solve the problem? So when you talk about, for those of you who have read the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, I think one of the things that he talked about is policy, policy, policy. Policy is the way to change the trajectory of where we're going in terms of creating more equitable society, a more equitable society. So what does the data tell you? Use the data to drive how do you create a more equitable community? How do you create a more equitable workforce? When you look at the data, we just talked about women making men making 1.33 times more than women. So what are some of the policies that you can put in place to make sure that women are receiving the same pay as men? One of the things that we're learning is that we don't ask how much did you make in your previous job, because if a woman made less in her previous job than a man, if it was already an inequity there, then when they move to their next job, it's probably going to be inequity in their earnings in their next job. So removing that question about how much do you make in your current job when you're beginning to negotiate salary. If you're asked that, one of the things that I do, if someone asks me about how much I make, I tell them, I don't discuss that, but I would want to make something that's commensurate with other people that are working in this field. And I come prepared with my salary recommendations based on the research that I've done for that area and the research that I've done for other people with my same educational attainment and with the same experience that I have. Carry as you climb. So the mayor of Dayton, she has this podcast called Carry as you climb. And I love the title of that because it's really about how do you help bring other people along? So if you're a woman in the workforce and you're in a leadership position, what have you done to educate young women that are coming up behind you to help navigate the nuances of working in the corporate workspace or working in a nonprofit organization or working in politics? So really, how do you support other women along the way? And then the other thing is, for men, if men want to be advocates, how can they sponsor young women and minorities to help them navigate the culture so that they learn some of the unspoken language? So one of the things that we hear over and over and over again is that you know, women, because they have families, they don't necessarily have the opportunity to go to the bar and hang out, and they're not necessarily invited to go to the games, where you have those informal interactions that help solidify a relationship. And oftentimes the deal is made at the golf course or at the bar or at a basketball or football game, and we just oftentimes don't have the opportunities to have those relationships. So then how can men or women who may not have children and have the ability to do those extracurricular things, how can they help other women navigate those spaces? Support one another. One of the things that I've learned in this position, is a very challenging position, is very demanding, and it is so important for me to have a friend group. And what I always tell folks is that anytime you want to talk, you know, anytime I present, anytime I'm a panelist, I always tell people, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love to go for coffee or tea. I'm pretty open about my experiences, and I believe it's really important to help people navigate those experiences. So making sure that you have a support group, not just a professional support group, but close friends that know who you are, understand your stressors, understand your anxieties, and understand how to help you navigate through that. Mentor, mentor, mentor. I do the Women of Toledo mentorship program. If a young woman contacts me and they ask me to meet, I do that. I'm also a mentor through an Everwise program on LinkedIn. So I just believe strongly in mentor, 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 and be open and honest about your experiences. Don't sugarcoat it, because that does not help the next person that's coming up if you are open and honest about your experience. Being a temperate radical, there's a book that's going to be on the book list that I have after this, and it's called Rocking the Boat, how temperate radicals can change the workforce, or something like that. But essentially, a temperate radical is somebody that works within a system to help create change. And so one of the examples that you'll see in the book, it actually talks about a woman who was a manager, and she had somebody on her team that needed a more flexible work schedule for her family. And so she had the ability as a leader within that organization to allow that person to have a more flexible work schedule. And the more that she was flexible with her team, the more productive her team was. Well, when other teams or other leaders within the organization, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I make my team more productive? She's quietly affecting change within that organization with her team, and eventually will have influence over other parts of the organizations because of the things that she's doing to make sure that her team is productive and to give her team what they need to be successful. And then the last thing is build the next generation. I have a young daughter that's coming up, and I know that she's probably going to be navigating a male-dominated environment. So I have to make sure that I'm building her confidence. I have to make sure that I'm helping her work through any anxiety that she has, so that when she shows up every day, that she feels strong, that she doesn't feel inferior, that she doesn't have to deal with imposter syndrome, which is a lot of what a lot of women and minorities deal with on a daily basis, but that she can show up fearless. When they call her aggressive, that she's okay with that because she's really being assertive, that she's using her voice, that she's not afraid to ask questions. She's not afraid to say that I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. So how are we investing in that next generation of women so that when they show up strong? These are some of the resources that I use in this presentation, but my favorite part, I always come with the book list. So here are some of my favorite books. Some I haven't read yet. Most of them I have read. My next couple of books are Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. I haven't read that yet. And then the Gutsy Girl Handbook. My mom is on me about reading the Gutsy Girl Handbook. So those are my two next books, but all the other ones I've read. 48 Laws of Power. I always put that on the list. I have a hard time getting through that book because it just doesn't align with my value system. But my male mentors tell me it's a really important book for helping you to navigate some corporate environments, because that is how folks navigate those environments. And then the last thing is The Art of War for Women. I tried to read The Art of War. I could not understand anything in that book, but then I found this book and it really applied it to women and how we navigate the workspace so that we can continue to be successful. And so I really strongly believe in folks reading those books. So I'll make sure that Nina has this presentation. But I think the most important thing, I know I went through those slides fairly quickly, but I think the most important thing as we talk about creating equity in our community is to let the data drive you. What does the data say? And then have very specific interventions and policies in place to speak directly to those inequities. And the data doesn't lie. Now, how people choose to interpret the data, or what language or context they choose to provide to the data, you can argue about that, but the data doesn't lie. The data will drive you and tell you what you need to do to either drive policy, to drive change within your organization, or to drive change within the community. So I hope that I didn't go too fast. I'll make sure that Nina has the presentation. And again, like my favorite part about this presentation is the book list. I always try to come with the book list because that has been like very important to me. All right.
Thank you so much, Katy. That was, yes, awesome and jam-packed. So much information. I was going to ask for the PowerPoint. I'm glad you offered it. I saw Nina said, hey, you can also play back and pause. Just wow. All right.
And my daughter is my role model. I saw that in there. My daughter is my role model. She has really taught me a lot. And just to see how she has grown, that becomes a reflection of who you are. So if you have amazing daughters, definitely, let them know that, because they are a reflection of who you are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you're right that so much of what you talked about really did tie together. Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. This presentation reminds me of something a friend of mine said, and this woman is like, she's so good with money. She says, quit talking, and I think she read this somewhere else. I know she read this somewhere else, but quit talking about lattes. It's not about the latte. It's that we don't teach women how to invest money. We talk to men about investing, but we don't talk to women. So Michelle, thank you for being the woman who talks to other women about what to do with our money. And what I really love about all of our mentors tonight is that we're hitting so many different pieces of the current landscape for women, right? We're talking about sexism. We're talking about how racism intersects with sexism, right? We're talking about how all these different, classism, right? Like there's so many different things that impact women. And if we want to create a more just society, we have to address all of these things at the personal level and also at social and community levels, right? So thank you all again. Let's give another round of the happy hands to our moderators. And let's talk a little bit. Who's got questions? I'll mute myself. You jump in.
This is Betsy. I sent in a question earlier when I registered about the best ways to deal with women working against each other. That seems to be a huge problem. I grew up in an environment where the women were incredibly strong and did a lot of good things, but they also were brutal to each other. So I experienced that, so I know how to look for it and see it, but I think a lot of people don't recognize that, and there's a lot of emotional things involved in that process too. So that's kind of what I wanted to ask about, what everybody's opinion was on that.
So, from my perspective, kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, I think it's really important to make sure you have a support group. I have found when I first got here, and I've talked about this a number of times, when I first got here, I received a lot of information just about people not working together and not being able to trust folks and things like that. And I was like, that's really weird for somebody that's new to a community, that every conversation you have, that's a part of the conversation. But what I found is a group of women who, have been wonderful. And what I've learned is that what I put into the relationship is what I get out. And so if I run into somebody that's negative, or somebody who's not, you know, a team player or somebody that wants to lift you up, then I stay clear of that. And you usually can pick up on that energy when you interact with somebody, and I just stay clear of it. I try to always be nice and respectful and professional, but at the same time, you know, before we get off this Zoom chat, I'll send my email address out, and I'll say, hey, if you want to grab coffee or something, shoot me an email. We can socially distance, and I'm always open for a conversation. And I think that's just how you do it. You meet people and you find your circle. If you look at, if you get an opportunity to read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and there's another book in there that's going to have something similar, they're going to say it different, but you have this circle of influence, and you work through that circle of influence. And the more people that you meet, that circle will expand, but you get to choose who's in that circle of influence. And if it's somebody that's negative, they don't get to stay there.
Who else wants to jump in on that?
Yes, I would like to jump in. Hello.
Hello.
Where are
Can you see me?
No. Oh, okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Maya.
Yeah, so I have a question about self-education. I was taught in high school. Well, first I went to Ottawa Hills High School, and I was never like really taught Black History Month or anything like that. And well, let me introduce myself. My name is Maya Williams, and I'm new to the Women of Toledo organization. I'm starting off as an apprentice, and I just have a question about self-education. Where do you start with that? Like, how can that be done?
So I'm assuming that, you know, you're asking me specifically. And one, welcome. So thank you for introducing yourself. And right now, there's so many trending books that you can start there, because those books in the back of them have references, and they'll tell you like the foundational text. So for example, right now I'm reading How to Be an Anti-Racist, because I'm not finished with that, but I'm also reading Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. And then if you look in the back, they give you books, and W.E. Du Bois. So like, he was a foundational person for that. So those are Black folk. So I always started, so what I would tell people who are currently studying this, if you have a trending book, look in the back and see, like, make a list of who those people studied, because most of these people are scholars, and that's how they do their research, by looking in the back of the book. But you can also look up foundational text, and I'll shoot my email out to everybody and we can have a conversation. But that's the easiest way, and that's the way to vet the materials that you can find. So I wouldn't go with articles like online. I would stick to books right now when it comes to self-education, until you're more familiar with what you believe to be true for yourself, and then move forward to Googling things like that. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes. Yep.
But I definitely say always look in that reference section in the back of these tabs.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to add to that too, as you begin to explore history and things like that, you know, I also caution folks, if you're doing self-education, at least for me, as I wanted to learn more, I had to mix it up. So I would read a book that might be heavy, talking about civil rights and things like that, but then I would like find another book that might be like a leadership book or a fiction book or something like that. Because if you don't balance that, if you're just constantly taking in that information, especially in this environment right now, it can really be mentally and emotionally taxing. And so you want to make sure that as you embark on that journey, that you're protecting yourself, protecting your emotions, because it's a lot of hard information, especially if it's something that you've just not explored yet. And then also, you know, like reaching out to Kelley. This is work that she does on a regular basis, but also finding like support systems of people that you can talk through it with you. And then the other thing I would say is, especially now where we're trying to advocate for policy change and things like that, you want to make sure that as you're learning that history, you're also learning how do you use that education to affect change. So you're not just consuming it and learning, but you're also looking at, okay, so where can I take this information and use that to affect change for my community, whether it's policy, whether it's at work, you know, getting people out to vote. So find some way to learn and then you use that energy to do something positive, because it could make you very angry. And then I've had a few books that I've started reading, and like Kelley said, as you read and you learn about people in the book, then it'll make you curious to learn about other people. So.
Thank you so much. I have a list of books here now that I wrote out for listening to your presentation and also watching it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
Nina, do we have time for one more? Oh, we can't hear you.
About 2 minutes. So if we want to have one more question. I guess no one have a question. No. Well, I guess no one have a question. So.
What's our call to action, Nina? What do we do now?
Yeah, what do we do now? Okay, I believe all the mentors and leaders will drop information in the chat. So, you know, so you can connect with them and, you know, follow up if you want to connect with them. They are very highly recommend mentors if you want to catch up with them. And then next, I believe, Angie, don't you have a conversation continuing on?
Yeah, I do. We got a lot of stuff going on at the Eberly Center. So one of the things, you know, we've talked a lot tonight about gender and the intersection of race, and that is, I think, at the forefront of a lot of women's minds right now. So at the Eberly Center, we're going to have a courageous conversation on September 9th to talk about how race shapes our lives, how it shapes the lives of Black women, of white women, of brown women, and what it means for us to work across racial difference and work together, right, towards sisterhood. So working for gender equity and racial equity and class equity too. I'll pop the link to our website in there so that you can sign up. And it's a conversation, so we'll be like dialoguing together on that.
Well, thank you, Angie. Well, we can wrap it up. It's 7:30. I just want to let everyone know, thank you so much for joining us tonight and spending your time on Wednesday. Happy Equality Day. So, you know, toast to the tenacity for 100 years. I really appreciate it. You will get, if you register for the session, you will automatically get a post session, and the post session will have all the PowerPoint, all the information, and some of the information in the group chat. So, you know, highly recommend you check the email. What's next for Women? Our circle is still going to continue on through Zoom for the month of September. So we have Momentum Circle coming up next week. And then Women's Circle is really exciting next month because it's a welcoming week. So we are partnering with Welcome Toledo Lucas County, and the conversation is about sense of belonging. So check it out, our calendar for that. And don't forget, September also is Hispanic Heritage Month. So Women of Toledo will be doing some Hispanic Women campaign, highlighting some of the Hispanic women that is in our community. I believe that's all from me. Angie, do you have any final word, or any of our mentors or leaders have any other final word? All right. So thank you again for joining us.